Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, where we're actually going to talk about kind of the opposite, which is empathy. And let's break down what the empathy paradox of narcissism is. So you don't need to know the criteria or the characteristics that comprise a narcissistic personality to know that people with a narcissistic personality style lack empathy. Maybe they have some variable empathy. They turn empathy on and off to get what they want. But if you're in their presence, it doesn't really feel like empathy because it's definitely not consistent. Being nice to you on a day that is a good day for them is not empathy. That's a coincidence. Don't confuse the two. Empathy, and I will be putting out some more detailed videos on empathy in the weeks to come. It's a funny thing. It's not as simple as saying, I feel you, or that must be hard. It's a bunch of different micro things we do in response to a person who's going through something, and there are different kinds of empathy. It's not just the words, it's the emotions on the empathic person's face. It's a person slowing down and actually listening to you, and in some cases, as we see, for example, with compassionate empathy, they don't just say, that must be hard. They actually try to do something to help you. Now, empathy requires being attuned enough to other people that you are aware of their emotional states and you respond to those emotional states in a self-aware and other-aware, frankly, manner. And you're aware of yourself and how you affect other people, right? Now, obviously, narcissistic people do none of that consistently, and they do none of it genuinely. When a narcissistic person looks empathic, it's usually performative or transactional. They do it to get something they need or to feel better about themselves. So here's where the paradox comes up. If there's one thing we know about a narcissistic person, it's that they are one hell of a salesperson. And that's why narcissistic people make such good CEOs, politicians, influencers, anything where they are trying to convince someone of something that benefits the narcissist and may or may not benefit the other person, but they try to make that other person think it's benefiting them, right? And the reason that they're so good at it is that because they are very socially perceptive. You heard that right. Narcissistic people are very socially perceptive. They're actually more attuned than you could ever imagine. They may actually pick up a tiny change in someone else's expression that other people may miss. They may pick up a shift in the energy of the room. They're very aware of other people. And they take that awareness and either perceive it as a threat or they use it to their advantage. Because empathy is not just awareness. Empathy is an emotional attunement, an awareness of other people and an awareness of self, and it is about caring about other people in a way that their emotions matter. You aren't just studying the other person when you're empathic. You are concerned. You're concerning yourself with their welfare. The narcissistic person's social perceptiveness and awareness is just that. It's a study. It's an analysis. It's almost like a thief casing a bank or a store or a house before they burglarize it. The social perceptiveness of the narcissistic person means that they are learning the equivalent of the exits, the entrances, the unlocked windows, the timings of when the deliveries come, when the guard goes on the break, right? It's acute observation. They're doing the equivalent of that with you. There's nothing empathic about it, though. The social perceptiveness and analysis of narcissistic people mean that they can look very interpersonally skilled. It's the core of the charm and the charisma. They know how to hold conversations with a wide variety of people. They are able to figure out the temperature of the room. But their social perceptiveness and their attunement, for as long as it lasts, is not serving an empathic function. It's doing two things. First, it's getting the narcissistic person's supply. Most people out there think that someone who asks good questions and is really paying attention, they'll think that person is empathic. and will often get into a conversation with a narcissistic person and in fact think and say like, oh, what a great person. And the supply for the narcissistic person, in some cases, it may simply be the information they get about a person from a conversation, but it also may be them learning how another person ticks. Or it could be getting attention and being told that they're great. The other thing that the narcissistic person is doing in their intent conversations is sussing out threat. Narcissistic people tend to be very suspicious. They are always scanning the room and determining where the threats lie. And when I say threat, I don't mean that they are looking for someone who is literally going to physically harm them. They are also scanning the room to determine if someone in the room may be smarter than them. Someone who may kind of be onto them. Might be someone whom they may not be able to play. And here is where it gets really interesting. And keeping in mind that all of this is happening at a rather deep, out of consciousness level for the narcissistic person, they are also scanning to figure out who really sees them, who kind of has their number. Any of you who have been truth tellers in a family system, you get this. And from an early age, you kind of had your parents' number, which may have turned you into a scapegoat. When a narcissistic person senses that you kind of see what they're about, that you're able to see past their shiny charm and charisma, that you kind of see through to their grift, they don't like that. And they are perceptive. And this, in fact, is why knowing what narcissism is and the warning signs like charm and charisma and that sort of performative empathy is so important to know this. It's why this channel exists. Because you may be able to dodge them early on simply by being perceptive and not falling for their grift. And what often happens is that a narcissistic person is often able to work a lot of the room, but not some selected people in it. And they will waste no time in talking smack about the people who the narcissistic person knows they can't quite play or manipulate, right? So they know they got your number. They'll say, I don't know, do any of you like that person? I don't trust them. I have been in this situation. I loathe fancy, charming, charismatic people. The shinier and more arrogant and snobbier and more elitist, the more I shut down. And I tend to distance myself and watch the whole thing from the perimeter. In one case, I remember a friend of mine really falling hard for such a charming person at a party and wanting to keep talking and even started dating this person, but I wasn't having it. And he could tell. I kind of saw who he was. Very early in the game, he started talking about me in a way that was meant to cause suspicion in her. Almost right away, the isolation game starts early when the narcissistic person has found their mark and they don't want other people to mess up their game. But let's go back to that social perceptiveness. Their skill at this actually can trick people into thinking that the person is not narcissistic, right? Because they understand people, right? New and even old observers of this narcissistic person may take the stance that this person is so acutely aware of everyone. They remember stuff about them. They ask lots of questions. They pick up the inconsistencies in the conversation. They must be empathic because they're so keen and sharp when it comes to what other people are doing or saying or what they're about. And this is a common error that people make. Social perceptiveness is not the same as empathy. In fact, this is why the entire realm of emotional intelligence and narcissism can get really thorny. Because in their fashion, the narcissistic people are very emotionally intelligent. They wouldn't be so successful if they weren't. The exception to this really are the vulnerable narcissistic folks who don't have this skill. But all of the other subtypes of narcissism have it. And their social perceptiveness is only focused on themselves. Read the room to benefit themselves. Who can do something for them in the room? Who may be the threat in the room that might unmask them? Who is the one who's easy prey in the room? Narcissistic people have an uncanny capacity to smell out weaknesses. Again, they can in essence sort of case the joint and figure out how to steal who and what they want. That, folks, is not empathy. Don't get me wrong. It is one hell of a skill to be that socially perceptive, especially if you're a strategist, a tactician, a negotiator, a lawyer, a person who's trying to close a deal. But it's not a person who really cares, who is listening to you and being present in your service as well, to be present with you, to care for you, and to help you. This social perceptiveness, kind of hollow social perceptiveness, is one of those subtle warning signs. So be careful to not confuse their social skill with empathy. The social skill can trick you, but as always, when you're in the presence of someone, pay attention to how you feel. In many ways, no matter how socially perceptive they are, it can feel like they are looking through you and not at you when they are talking to you. And just being a great conversationalist, that's not empathy. That's charm. Keep them separate, and trust me, if they sense that you can sort of smell them out and see through their mask, they will avoid you, but they also may talk smack about you. We are told that people who are socially skilled are somehow virtuous. It's not that easy, and it can take a minute to figure this out. None of this is simple, and some of these elements of narcissism can, if nothing else, I hope you can hear this and recognize it makes sense why I was played, because I actually thought this person was empathic. We've all made this mistake. I hope that helps, and thanks again.